My name's Nishant, and I'm really excited to be here today with you to talk about incident management. And my goal is that after this session, you should have a good idea of how to run a healthy incident management process within your team, your company, whatever it is, minimize impact to your users, and continue to learn and improve from past incidents and experiences. So starting out with a little bit about myself, how did I get here? I'm the engineering manager for the Pinterest ad serving platform team. We own several really critical systems that power what is now over $2 billion a year ad delivery system. In that role, as well as my involvement with various incident manager on call rotations at Pinterest, I've experienced a lot of high severity incidents, about over 150 at this point, and I'm hoping that some of these learnings will be useful to all of you as well. So to start off, very basic question, what is an incident? Now there's a few different situations that we may classify as an incident. It may be when a system's not behaving as expected, if users aren't able to access their service, when employees aren't able to do their best work, et cetera. So these may all be types of incidents. So sum it up, an incident is basically an event that is not part of the standard operation of any service. However, you might say, well, Nishant, that's also true for most bugs, right? A bug is also typically a way in which a service or any sort of functionality may have some interruptions or quality degradation, and you'd be right. So especially as an organization that is running an incident management process, we need a different definition, a more actionable definition of what an incident really is. So from an organizational perspective, we can say that an incident is when we need one or more people to drop everything else that they're doing and jump in to fix the bleeding immediately. So this is what differentiates an incident from a bug. A bug typically has an SLA as well, but may only require response during business hours and from the team that owns the component that is facing the bug, while an incident might actually require a response from multiple teams, even beyond the one that is just initially facing the root cause itself. So an incident, like we said, is when we need one or more people to drop everything else and fix the bleeding immediately. So now the question is, what is incident management? And I think incident management is a process that has 5 main phases, starting out with detection. So how do we know something is wrong? Typically, ideally, you want this through an automated alerts, but it may also be through manual reporting or observation. The second step is triaging, understanding responsible and how severe the incident is, so we can decide accordingly how many resources we need to allocate to this problem. Third step is mitigation. So before anything else, stop the bleeding as soon as possible. This doesn't necessarily include knowing and figuring out the root cause. There may be other ways to stop bleeding before we actually understand the root cause itself. Once we've done that, we can go ahead and move into prevention, which is now identifying and solving the root cause, ensuring that the issue is not going to reoccur, at least in the near future. And then finally, remediation. So going back, looking at what happened, understanding how we got here, and figuring out what action items we need to take to make the system more resilient to such failures going forward. So the first step is, how do we declare an incident? And let's start with when, perhaps. And for this, I want to reference a story from Toyota. Toyota has this concept of an end-on cord from their famous manufacturing line, which is basically this rope that any employee who works on the manufacturing line can pull whenever they find a problem with the production line. Pulling this cord will immediately halt production. The team leader is going to go to the person who pulled the line, ask them why the line was pulled, and the team is basically going to work together to solve the problem before resuming production. Now, in software engineering, we typically don't need to pause everything. We may basically ask one team or even just a handful of team members to pause what they're doing and respond to the situation. So, TLDR, we should create an incident when we need immediate support from one or more people. And since every component of organization will need some custom criteria, that is also something really important to find up front. So for instance, for us as the ads team, one of the most commonly referenced incident criteria is revenue impact. If we notice that there is, X dollars of revenue being lost, that's worthy of filing an incident. If the Android team notices that the app is crashing more often than before, if our content recommendation team notices that there's still content, et cetera, et cetera. Those are all different criteria that a team or a component might define for their own incident levels. The second question is, who should declare an incident? And the answer is anyone who notices the impact. It's really, really important as an organization, as a team, to empower everyone in your team or organization to declare an incident and make it really easy for them to reference the incident criteria. This way, we're making sure that anyone who notices something brings it up. We can figure out if something is wrong before we move on. And then lastly, how? Once again, making it extremely easy to record a new incident. whether you use Jira or some sort of ticket management process, filing a ticket under some sort of incident project type, using a Google form, using a Slack command, et cetera, whatever the preferred method is, it should just be really simple. And the one thing that should happen is whenever a new incident is declared, someone should be notified, whether that is the owner of the system for which an incident is being declared, some sort of incident on call rotation, someone should know so that they can kick off the incident management process. So now that we've talked about declaring incidents, we know what an incident is. How do we actually differentiate between different kinds of incidents? So which incidents are more severe than others? So all incidents are not the same. We said that incidents require one or more people to drop everything and respond. However, the scope of how many people or how many teams are expected to respond may vary greatly based on the impact. So if we say 1% of users are reporting that they can't, let's say 1% of Android users are reporting that they can't send messages perhaps, versus 20% of Android users are saying that the app is crashing, they can't log in at all. Clear to see that the number of people or teams that may be expected to respond are vastly different. So for the second one, if users basically aren't able to use the Pinterest app at all, we may not only have engineers respond, we may have legal and comms teams involved to make sure that users know that we're aware that we're working on it. The ads teams might need to know so that if in case Android ad revenue is impacted, we can start to take some action, etc. So like we said before, these criteria are going to be customized for every team or component within your service architecture. So one general framework I like to use is basically how many people need to respond or need to know, which is something we've been talking about many times today. So honestly, very many frameworks use sort of 3 to 4 levels, starting at step 0 being the worst to step 3 or step 4 being the most lightweight kind of incident. And you can think about this as how many people or how many levels above do we need to notify about the impact. So for instance, if only your team's manager and perhaps a few other senior tech leads, et cetera, need to know. For example, if Pinterest latency goes up, probably not that many people need to get involved. We can think of that as a step 2 or step 3. If the whole site is down, then senior company leadership, company executives might need to know, which means it falls into the step 0, step 1 bucket, and much more people need to respond and need to know. So again, it's a very generalized framework. We can talk through various examples for each component, but it served us well for defining severity levels and being able to differentiate between multiple types of incidents. So now that we know when to declare an incident, what do we actually do when that's happened? First off, some administrative stuff, basically setting up your communication channels. This may be including a chat room, a Slack channel, etc., depending on what form you use, setting up a video call or a physical room if you and your team are getting together in person. And then finally, this is sort of optional, best judgment, but it's usually helpful to create an investigation doc to keep notes of everything, all the work that's going on to try and triage and root cause the incident. Next, we need to define and assign some critical roles in order to manage the incident itself. The first one is the incident runner. This person is responsible for the actual investigation, for the outcome of the incident response. Now, this may include some amount of communication, escalation to other teams to get involved, et cetera, but they're basically the person on the ground who's responsible for running point, debugging the incident itself. The other role is the incident manager. Now, this person is there to help with understanding the impact, determining the severity, finding the best incident runner. So this may be the subject matter expert, the owner of the system, et cetera. They're there to support the incident runner, handle sort of broader communications to the company, to other teams, escalate to other teams. They're also there to help keep the team calm and help them prioritize what are the best next steps. In case the team is not able to make progress, the incident manager will typically jump in and oversee the process and help the team figure out what to do next. If not, they will help figure out who to loop in next, who might be the best person to figure out next steps. So it's really important, therefore, for the incident manager to be someone who has a lot of experience with these issues, is a confident decision maker, and has shown strong problem-solving skills in the past. So the first thing that teams will typically do after an incident is declared is the impact and severity assessment. So this is something that the incident runner and incident manager will typically work on together. Understanding how severe the incident is to determine which teams to escalate to, whether or not to kick off sort of internal or external comms based on the impact. And then finally, this may also be important to figure out what resolution process to follow. So for instance, if we are, it's like 9 p.m., most engineering teams are no longer available. We may not want to take a very invasive process. For example, rolling out a hotfix or rolling forward an entire system could potentially be a slightly higher risk. So for a lower severity incident, knowing that we can live with the impact or it's not as critical, we may choose to just roll back. Or if the impact is low enough, just let it sit till the next morning and wait till unchanged are available before taking the next steps. So that's just one example of how determining the impact and the severity is really important. We may also need this to figure out how many other teams to loop in, so on and so forth. So now that this is done, the incident runner and incident manager can start taking on different responsibilities. The runner can now start to help with purely debugging, escalating to relevant teams, while the incident manager can start to handle internal comms, which is status updates to the team, to the company, and any external comms if partners are impacted, if public users need to know, for instance, if there's a widespread service outage, etc. Then, as we talked about, priority number one is always to stop the bleeding first. So the way we can do this is we can either root cause and solve that problem itself, or we can just treat the symptoms. So one common thing I've seen is just putting up a quick patch to alleviate the system before we figure out the root cause, or just rolling back any suspicious changes at the time. So if you notice that a deploy went out around when your, let's say, success rate metrics started to drop, rolling back the deploy, if any experiment changes happened, undoing those, et cetera, et cetera. Very often, those tend to alleviate the symptoms, stop the bleeding, and allow us to focus on making the system more resilient rather than worrying about user impact. Very often, if it will take longer to fix, the team will figure out a patch and go from there. Once we've done this, we can communicate to the team that the incident has been mitigated, which means that users are no longer seeing any impact. Users, partners, whoever is the impacted party here. So now that we've stopped the bleeding, we can move on to figure out the root cause. So the goal here is to ensure that this problem won't happen again for at least a few weeks. Obviously, it's impossible to guarantee that the problem is never going to happen again, but we can at least ensure that it's not going to reoccur in the near future. Then once that is done, restoring all systems to regular operations. So in case we pause any deploys, if we did actually roll back any changes, making sure that things are back to normal. Once all this is done, we can say that the incident has been resolved, the root cause has been solved, and then send out a final update to any necessary parties, whether internal or external, to let them know that we've figured out the problem and have made sure that it's not going to occur for whatever period it is that the team has determined. Now we've solved the problem. Now comes, honestly, the most interesting part, which is the incident postmortem. So what do we do after the incident has been resolved? First step is easy. Actually define a postmortem process. It's really important because our goal here is to make our systems continuously more resilient. So it's really important that we identify and define a rigorous postmortem process to make sure that we're understanding the gaps in the system, documenting them, and identifying any remediation items that we need to take to make the system more resilient moving forward. So what I've seen work really well is having a postmortem document template so that everyone who files an incident has to go through and fill out the exact same pieces of information, such as what happened, how do we solve it, et cetera, et cetera. We'll talk about that in a sec. It's really helpful to have an in-person review once the postmortem document is written, so that people from your team, other teams, such as important stakeholders like system owners, SREs, other incident managers, and incident runners, can attend and ask questions, discuss areas of improvement, bring up things that may have been missed during the incident, running process itself, and then finally making sure that we are following a strict SLA, making sure that any remediation items that are tracked, that are identified, are tracked and reported, making sure that they're completed in time, which helps us hold a high bar for quality and stability on our team and across our company. So what might a postmortem document actually look like? Here's a few things that I've seen work well. An estimate of the impact to determine what follow-ups are necessary. For instance, if, let's say, advertisers were overbilled for ad impressions that they never actually received, we may need to process refunds, so on and so forth. Clearly listing out what the root cause is, identifying or detailing a timeline of the events that occurred leading up to the incident, once the incident began, once the team started looking into the incident, how we mitigated it, how we resolved it, et cetera. Based on all of this, we can also identify a few key metrics, such as time to detect, time to mitigate, time to resolve, which are really helpful as follow-ups to understand what part of the incident management process we need to improve. For example, if it took really long to detect an incident, that might mean that we need better alerts in place. So Finally, we write down these remediation items, and then based on the severity, we have clear SLAs defined. So critical remediation items need to be done in a few days. Less critical ones or more complicated ones may take a few weeks, but ensuring that we have a deadline for those to be done. Otherwise, teams may get involved with their regular day-to-day work and forget about completing these critical stability tasks. So, talking a little bit more about postmortems, it is really important for postmortems to be blameless. Now, what does that mean? Really, what that means is focus on the what and the why, and not the who. Humans make mistakes. That's what we do. That's why our systems break. It's up to us as the system owners to build systems that can handle these mistakes. So, for instance, if an incident was caused by a null pointer in a production system, which is causing the service to crash, the real question to ask here is not why did someone write code that threw a null pointer. The question is, why was that change not caught by unit tests, by integration tests, by some sort of like canary testing, etc. The other one that comes to mind from a infamous Reddit post is like if someone accidentally corrupts or deletes a production database, why was such access made available to them in the first place? That's a shortcoming on the system side rather than the person side. So that's what it's really important to focus on as well. One helpful framework, also coming from the Toyota manufacturing line, is the 5 whys technique, basically asking why 5 times to really get to the root cause of a problem. And the key takeaway here from the 5 whys technique is, well, 1, 5 is a guiding number. It may be more or less. Secondly, never identify a person or people as the root cause. So that's not where we should stop asking why. So let's go through an example. Like we said, an incident might be, the what here might be that users can't log into their accounts. So the first why is that the API is rejecting their login request. Diving deeper, it's happening because the API can't talk to the authentication service. Going one step deeper, it's because the API does not have the right SSL cert. Going forward, someone copied the wrong config to prod. Now, we could stop here, but we know that our 5 whys framework tells us, firstly, this is only 4 whys. Secondly, we know that we should never identify a person as the root cause. So going one level deeper, we'll say that there's no validation for the API. If we had a validation in place, someone wouldn't have been able to copy the wrong config to prod and roll it out, which means this incident would not have occurred. So hopefully that's a useful illustration of how this technique might help. I have a few quick lessons that I wanted to share. First of all, it's really important to destigmatize incidents. Incidents are a learning opportunity. We should celebrate those who respond to incidents and also those who report them. It is almost always better, I can't think of many examples where it's not, to have a false positive where someone declares an incident that later turns out to not be one, rather than someone being afraid to file an incident because they're not sure how people will respond. It's always better to file prematurely, get immediate support, resolve the issue, and then later decide that it wasn't really significant enough to warrant the whole incident management and postmortem process, because the alternative is employees wait too long to declare the incident, and then the impact balloons and gets even worse than it could have been if they had just spoken up earlier. Secondly, the incident manager needs to be someone who is confident, and this is something that obviously comes over time. But the guiding principle for the incident manager is that they're there to minimize risk and drive resolution. So let's go through a few quick examples. Let's say we have an ad system that is misbehaving and causing higher than normal ad load, perhaps, or ads with lower relevance. Question here becomes, is it better to turn off ads entirely for a period of time or show irrelevant ads for that period? Many things may factor into this decision. The incident manager might not even be the one to make the decision on their own, but it's up to them to drive an answer to this by consulting with teams and getting the right people in the room to make that decision. In this case, it might be our senior company leadership, head of engineering, etc. Another example is, like we said, if we determine that the root cause of an incident is a code change, how should we actually go ahead resolving this? Should we roll back the code change, which may also involve rolling back other commits? Is that problematic or not? Should we fix forward, or should we do a hot fix? Again, a lot of things factor into this, such as time of day, team availability, severity of the incident, et cetera, et cetera. And then lastly, if the incident runner is essentially not being able to make progress, either because they are panicked in the moment or they are not the best person to advise on this particular system or this issue, the incident manager might step in and help identify a new incident runner, or basically help coach them, make sure that they are learning from the process and being ready to identify the next step forward. And then finally, if an incident is happening late at night, determine based on the impact, at what point does it make sense to stop the investigation until business hours when other teams are available? Or even if it's 2 a.m, should we start waking people up because the impact is severe enough that we need immediate action? These are all sort of hard decisions that the incident manager might need to make. And as a result, it's really helpful to have this guiding principle. Look at what needs to be done to minimize risk, downtime for users, and help drive resolution in a timely manner. Therefore, it's really helpful for an incident manager to be someone who's seen these issues before, has strong problem-solving skills, and has shown the confidence to act rationally in these situations. Again, for the incident manager, it's really helpful to, well, it's important to teach them that it's okay to ask for help. Rely on your incident runner. You are often not going to be the subject matter expert in the room. Also, if there's a lot of incidents going on, loop in other managers to help. There are other people who may have seen incidents like these before. Feel free to reach out to them and get their help as well. Make sure that you have a list of key contacts so that you know in those moments, let's say it's 1 a.m, you're not sure who's going to help. Make sure you know who to reach out to. Make sure it's clearly documented somewhere. And then finally, what's really helpful for running a robust incident management process is to measure certain things and then iterate on that. So our goal is to reduce downtime and make our systems more resilient. So these are 3 metrics that we talked about before that are really helpful to measure. Time to recovery, time between failures, and time to detection. You can track all of these on a per component level and take these forward and essentially track them over time, saying for our Android app, we've noticed that time to recovery is usually really high. So this may spark some action items like training the team to go from detection to recovery better, implementing some frameworks perhaps that make it easier to recover from an Android app incident, such as an experiment framework that takes effect sooner than perhaps rolling out a new version of the Android app might, et cetera, et cetera. So these are 3 metrics that we found really helpful. It's not always perfect, but it's a helpful metric to see how well you're doing and gives you something to improve upon. And then finally, error budgets are a really helpful framework to basically trade off innovation versus KTLO, which is keep the lights on, sort of stability work. Keeping in mind that if you define an SLA, you have some amount of time that your system can be down before you start to breach that SLA. So one example here is if you have an SLA of 3 nines, 99.9%, your system can be down for about 8 hours or close to 9 hours before you start to break that SLA. So tracking this error budget over time, looking at how much error budget you have left, can help you determine when it's time to stop that sort of new feature and new innovation work and focus on stabilizing the system in an urgent manner. So to wrap up here, we talked about what an incident is. An incident is when we need multiple people to drop what they're doing and jump in and help immediately. We talked about how to declare an incident and how to define a process to respond to them, make sure the right people are involved, communicate the impact to our stakeholders, internal or external, and get the support that we need. We talked about how to learn from the incident, using a postmortem process to reflect on what went wrong, identifying remediation items, and making sure we are continuously improving our systems for the future. And then finally, we talked about ways to measure and improve our incident handling process and ways to reward and motivate the team to continuously take this work seriously, which helps them value and prioritize this work as well. So that's all I have today. Thank you so much. If you do have any questions, you're always welcome to reach out to me at nroypinterest.com.
Thank you so much, Nishant. And thank you for another very enlightening talk today. So we do have a couple of questions over at the Q&A tab. So firstly, how would a team get started on creating a strategy/process for incident management? So what's the point to get started?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I'd say early on, especially at an early stage of a company, it might just be a very basic process saying, when we notice something is wrong, here's what we're going to do. We're going to bring the team together in a virtual room, take action together. And from there, I think the postmortem process is actually really the most helpful way to get started, because as you start to see things going wrong, you'll start to observe patterns. And from there, you can identify like what worked well, what didn't work well, and then start to turn that into a strategy or process for continuous incident management. So it's pretty custom, I'd say, but it's starting out with just how are you going to respond to anything that goes wrong, and then taking the learning continuously from that and going from there.
And also, in your presentation, you had an incident management should be someone who has dealt with this kind of a thing before, and it kind of sounds like a chicken egg problem, like chicken egg problem. How do you become an incident manager without first encountering a incident without being one? Well, without being an incident manager.
Right. Everyone has to start somewhere. Obviously, ideally in your company, you'll have someone who's seen incidents maybe before at a different job, or even as you're setting up the basic stack, has seen things go wrong and has helped fix them. So perhaps the first set of incident managers might be someone who are like system experts or experts on the technical stack that you have. So they can sort of guide the overall conversations from there and then go from there. But you're right. It is a bit of a cold start problem. Until you dive in, you don't know what to learn from. So you got to start somewhere.
All right. And then we have a couple more questions. So how descriptive RCA should be?
Yeah, assuming RCA here is root cause analysis, I'd say as descriptive as is necessary for the team for anyone who wasn't involved in the incident to understand what went wrong. So if I wasn't involved, I read your analysis, I can easily understand, I can follow that process from how we went from the change to the incident. That's really helpful. That's the level of description I would say we need.
And somebody asked, could you elaborate on the difference between a bug and an incident again?
Yeah, so they're both when something goes wrong with your system, but an incident is when we need sort of immediate response. So that is very much determined by your company, your team, your component. Versus a bug is something that still has an SLA. It needs to be fixed in a timely manner, but that time may be a longer period. So for instance, if, like I said before, some Android users are noticing that they can't send messages on the app, that may be something we need to fix over a matter of days or weeks, versus that if people can't log into the Android app at all, that is something we need to fix immediately because it's causing major impact to users and our product itself.
Then we also had a question, how many incidents is a normal number of incidents per year and so on?
As long as that number or the severity and number in combination are going down, I'd say that's a good thing. 0 is a very abnormal number. That probably means you're not moving aggressively enough. You're not setting aggressive goals. However, if you're continuously just finding yourself, mired in incidents and more severe incidents at that, that's also not normal. So it's really a little bit bespoke to your team and your situation. But sort of what I like to see is that at the very least, even if number of incidents is going up, we're at least moving from Sev 0s and Sev 1s to more Sev 2s and Sev 3s. So our systems are at least helping us make sure that we're minimizing the impact, not necessarily getting rid of the incidents entirely, if that makes sense.
It does. Also, something that I got the image of during the presentation is that a lot of this incident management is not only just managing the incidents technically, but it's also a lot of, I would say, people work. So managing the team, like how do they respond together? So maybe the question here is more, do you feel like these are on equal parts in incident management, or does one come above the other one in your opinion? Is it more of a technical matter or more of a team management / people matter?
That is a great question. I don't know if it's one or the other, but they are both equally important, like you said, especially as the team continues to grow and your tech stack continues to grow more complex and large. The more people that get involved, or the more people that need to get involved, obviously the more important the second part becomes. As long as just 1 or 2 people are capable of handling the incident process, the people management process becomes less and less important there. But yeah, at a company like Pinterest or any company that's really scaling, it's really important to make sure that the folks who are managing the incident know how to continuously keep the team engaged, keep them motivated over time to keep responding to incidents. So that does become a very important part of maintaining a healthy incident management process. Can't have one without the other, I guess.
Yeah. We got a couple more questions actually during this answer. So budgets on SLA is a good idea, but if your product, for example, 10 developer teams are working on that product, is the budget for every team sensible?
It's a good question. And I guess is if each team owns a specific product or feature, it might be helpful to have a budget on the SLA for each one. So if you have 10 teams, one works on messaging, one works on content recommendations, one works on sort of image visualization, et cetera, et cetera. Depending on the severity of each feature. So let's say Pinterest, for instance, we have a home feed. That's the first feed that people see when they open the app. We might want to have a much tighter budget there versus, a different flow, for example, like searching for a user and following a user's profile, for instance. Again, don't quote me on this. These are just examples I'm picking out, but obviously you can see how one would be more critical than the other. So maintaining different budgets there is definitely helpful for each team.
All right. And then another question, would you classify hacking attempt as incident or even phishing emails?
Very dependent on what the product is and how severe that or how successful that attempt was, I guess. If you're seeing a very, very large spike in hacking attempts that are also being successful, perhaps that is an incident because it's causing risk to your users. But if your systems are in place such that even with those hacking attempts or phishing email attempts, your system or your product is able to notify the user that, hey, this is a phishing email, don't respond to this. That's a sign that you've done something successfully in the past and already made sure that your systems are resilient to that impact. So I'd say it's more determined by the impact of those attempts than the actual attempt itself. In the middle of the night, if I get an alarm and fix it on my own, there's not need to declare an incident. That's a good question. I would say, once again, referring to as long as you have a very solidly defined incident severity criteria, that is the best way to determine when to or when to not declare an incident. Even if you just fix it on your own and you don't need any help, that's a good point. I did talk about needing help to declare an incident. In this case, I guess if it was the middle of the day and you weren't the right person, think of it not as for yourself, but for anyone involved. If we determine that anyone who receives an alert might need help, that should ideally be a consideration for the incident management or the incident severity criteria. And if it breaches your criteria, so for instance, going back to the Android instance, if more than 1% of users are declaring login failures, we want to declare a SEV3 incident hypothetically. If we do meet that criteria, it's still good to declare an incident, even if you resolved it on your own, so that the teams that need to follow up can go through the entire postmortem process, identify any remediation items, action items, and go forth from there.
Hi, we're from Ethicode,
who brings you the DEVOPS conference.
Continuous delivery has been a key focus for over a decade, and platform engineering is its natural evolution.
If you want to remove the pain and uncertainty from your software development, we'd love to help you.
Discover more at ethicode.com
and enjoy the insightful sessions at the DEVOPS conference.